Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com. And today we're going to be deconstructing Mussorgsky's Night on Bald Mountain. This is really kind of cool because everybody loves A Night on Bald Mountain. I mean, doesn't everybody love a night? I mean, you just gotta love A Night on Bald Mountain. It is one of the coolest pieces of orchestral music in the repertoire. So quintessentially Russian, so demonic, so fantastic, so only partially by Mussorgsky himself, because the version that we all know and love was arranged by Rimsky-Korsakov. But the piece has a huge and vast and fascinating history. And we're going to explore some of that with some musical examples. Now, first, we need to deal with the title. The Night on a Night, or just Night on Bald Mountain in Russian. In Russian, it is bald. It's lisoy, which means bald. It's Night on Bald Mountain. But they changed it in English to Night on the Bare Mountain because they thought that bald sounded too much like hairless. And my response to that is A, a bald landscape is a legitimate use of the English language, and B, bare sounds naked. So you have your choice. You can be hairless or you can be naked with all your parts dangling out. I learned it as A Night on Bald Mountain, and that's the way it's going to stay. Now, A Night on Bald Mountain was written in 1867 by Mussorgsky as a tone poem, which was never performed in his lifetime. Now, Mussorgsky, as everyone knows, was a composer of extraordinary originality, but very little technique. He really was more or less kind of quasi-self-educated and not even that good at that bit. And his orchestral music is really rough and ragged. That's why his operas, especially Boris Godunov, were rescored by Rimsky-Korsakov and then later by Shostakovich, who tried to de-Rimsky it, but also improve Mussorgsky because it's just bad. I mean, there's just all kinds of problems with his orchestration, impracticalities and misjudgments, and Rimsky, you could argue that Rimsky-Korsakov went too far in turning the music into Rimsky-Korsakov, but Rimsky-Korsakov was a great composer. And so one great composer's, take on another great composer is always going to be interesting and have its own validity, as opposed to some nameless hack's take, like all the people messing with Bruckner, that kind of stuff. That's not what we're doing here. We're talking about a composer who was quite familiar with Mussorgsky, knew him well, knew the style, knew what he wanted, knew what he was doing, and really did a very fine job. And that's something that I think is going to come away from this, because what we're going to do, for the most part, is compare Mussorgsky's original with the Rimsky-Korsakov later reworking, which happened in about 1886, 5 years after Mussorgsky died. On the other hand, one of the problems that some of you may have had, as I had originally, is that the original version, the 1867 version, is not the version that Rimsky used in making his arrangement, because he had no access to that original manuscript. What happened was this, and it's really very fascinating. Mussorgsky didn't want to waste the original, because he wrote it and then Balakirov, or one of those people in the Russian Kuchka, the Five, the Handful, whatever they were called, that group, trashed it, and it never got performed. And so he salvaged it, Mussorgsky did, for his opera. It was going to be a joint opera called Mlada, which Rimsky-Korsakov later wrote all by himself, and he made a choral vocal version of it. Can you imagine such a thing? And that never happened. It never got performed. It never got completed. Mussorgsky never finished it. And so then he reused it in vocal form, reworking it again in his incomplete opera, Sorochinsky Fair. Now, Sorochinsky Fair is a comic opera, and he stuck it in for some reason as a dream interlude, because there's absolutely no point in the opera in having it there at all. It serves absolutely no purpose in the context of the opera. Now, that version exists in piano vocal score, And that is what Rimsky used. So initially, if you have the original version and the Rimsky version, you think, oh my God, Rimsky must have done all kinds of crazy things because it's completely different in terms of form and organization. But the fact of the matter is that the Sorochinsky fair version is extremely close to the Rimsky version in terms of overall shape and progression of episodes. Rimsky's is still, it's completely different, obviously, in terms of orchestration, and he's made it into a very cohesive and compact symphonic poem type form, which the original never really is. Not the original, not the later operatic versions. And the vocal versions, the vocal version has been performed and recorded at least 3 or 4 times. How? Well, here we go again. What happened was, in the 1920s or 30s, the Russian composer Vissarion Shebalin orchestrated Sorochinsky Fair. And so he made a performable version of the vocal version of A Night on Bald Mountain, which he moved from its original position, wherever it was, into the middle of Act 3. We don't need to go into it. But the problem with the Shebalin version, which you can hear, Claudio Abbado recorded it, it's on Sony with the Berlin Philharmonic. Zdeněk Motzel did it with the New Jersey Symphony, it's on Delos, and there's a Rostosvensky recording with the BBC. There are versions of it floating around out there. It kind of sounds like Borodin's Polovtsian dances on a very bad day. That's basically what it is. I can't really imagine people singing it, but they do. And there are solos and choral things, and it comes in sections. Actually, all of Mussorgsky's versions come in chunks, as you'll see. The Rimsky is wonderfully fluent because fluency was one of Rimsky's strong points. But so you can go hear that choral version if you're interested. I don't have permission to use it, and I wouldn't want to do it anyway. It's really kind of bad, but it does follow the course of the Rimsky version a lot more clearly than Mussorgsky's original does. And so I wanted to clear that up because the first time I heard the original, I'm like, wow, that's totally different. And it is, because it's not the one Rimsky used. So there you go. All of the themes in the Rimsky-Korsakov version come from Mussorgsky and come from the Sorochinsky Fair version of the Mussorgsky. And so they're all there. It's all there. And the marvel is how Rimsky-Korsakov put it all together. And of course, he scored it just fabulously, which really makes it an original work of Rimsky-Korsakov. Many scholars consider it to be, and they should. Rimsky-Korsakov really deserves credit for this wonderful, wonderful piece. But I want to start you off now with musical examples, and I've got a dozen of them. So there's a lot we're going to go through. As I said, the original Mussorgsky version is very, very sectional. It's really almost a ballet suite, more or less, the way it's written. It has sections that come to full stop with a pause, and then something else gets started. And Mussorgsky's and Rimsky's both start with the same idea, and it's played twice, exactly the same in both, and Mussorgsky preserved that in all of his versions. So here is the original of what Mussorgsky wrote. And we're able to do this so wonderfully because Naxos, thank God for Naxos, has recorded the original and the revised versions on the same disc. That is the original and the Rimsky versions on the same very, very fine disc with Theodore Kuchar and the National Symphony Orchestra of Ukraine, along with an excellent Pictures in an Exhibition and some other Mussorgsky short bits. This is a terrific disc, by the way. I recommended it, I think, in my Pictures in an Exhibition video, and you really ought to consider it if you're interested in A Night on Bald Mountain, because you get both versions, which is just wonderful. So here is Mussorgsky's original. Now that is your basic idea for the work, and Rimsky-Korsakov sort of tidied it up a bit, and very effectively, I might add, including alterations in dynamics and, of course, the scoring, and makes it, I think, sound rather more threatening and a little less just nasty. You know, the Rimsky is kind of rough and ready, which is what we'll hear all the way through this. The Rimsky is far more, you call it, it's not smoother. I think it's just more pointedly effective in what it does. So here is the Rimsky, which we're all familiar with. Now, after this opening, both versions proceed to a second theme. And that second theme is, da 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 dum bum bum. It's ubiquitous in this piece, even more ubiquitous in Mussorgsky's original, as you will hear. One of the interesting things about the way Mussorgsky worked in evolving the piece is that he often presents a theme in a what you might call an embryonic or provisional form, and then only sort of crystallizes its final form, or the form he's going to use from there on, a little bit later on. It's a very effective way, actually, of introducing tunes and spending time and spinning them out. So here is how Mussorgsky gets to his second theme. So there it is. And as you can hear, it kind of starts a little somewhere and then it stops dead. And then a new section begins with the ultimate version of that same tune. Now, Rimsky, of course, is far more fluent. He wants to put the thing together into a continuous thread of orchestral narrative. And here is how he deals with that same passage. Now, we've come to a full stop in both cases. What happens with Mussorgsky is that he now begins what you can only describe as a kind of ballet episode. It's a couple of minutes long. His version is like 2 or 3 minutes longer than the Rimsky-Korsakov version. It has more music in it. It has nothing to do with anything thematically. It is not, to be honest, Mussorgsky's finest moment musically. It's colorful, it's entertaining, it changes the mood and kind of wrecks the atmosphere, in my humble opinion. So here is Mussorgsky's, I don't know what you'd call it, next episode that starts after a full pause. Here's a little bit of it anyway. It's cute. It's perky. What is it? I don't know. So that goes on for a bit. And eventually it works its way back to the music that we all know and love, which is that wonderful crescendo thing that here's Rimsky's version of it, just so you know what it sounds like. Then we'll play Mussorgsky. We'll reverse the order of things. So here's Rimsky doing it. So that's the Rimsky-Korsakov version, and that's the version you may be familiar from The Wizard of Oz, as Dorothy is fleeing the Wicked Witch of the West down through the tower, and the guards are chasing her, and oh, it's wonderful. Yes, they splice in that little bit. This is the way Mussorgsky does it, which I think is really vastly less effective than the way Rimsky-Korsakov builds it up. See, what you notice is that in the Mussorgsky, in the original version, that passage is presented as just sort of another incident in a big jumble of material, whereas Rimsky-Korsakov makes it a genuine dramatic event. He builds it up, it becomes a huge crescendo. It's really rather cool. And that fanfare that you'll hear, that dum-ba-da-da, dum-bum-bum-ba, dum-ba-da-da, that does not occur anywhere in Mussorgsky's original. It is in the Sorochinsky Fair version. So it is actually one of Mussorgsky's ideas, but Rimsky used it quite differently. So now we're at sort of the central portion of the work. And Rimsky-Korsakov creates a really wonderfully effective middle section based on themes from Mussorgsky's Sorochinsky Fair version, not so much the original. And I want to play you that episode because it shows you, first of all, how Rimsky-Korsakov creates an interlude, as it were, but it doesn't lose the atmosphere of the original. He really sustains it quite marvelously, and it leads into a recapitulation, a return of the opening idea, even more ferociously than before. So here that goes. Now, from here on in, it couldn't be more different. Mussorgsky goes completely off the rails. I don't understand why. Mussorgsky completely missed the opportunity to bring back his original idea. The main theme in the Mussorgsky is the da 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 dum bum ba da 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 dum bum bum and its derivatives, and he just works it and works it and works it endlessly from there until the very end of the piece. That's basically what it consists of. And so now what happens is that instead of Rimsky's extremely well-constructed central episode leading to that ferocious recapitulation of the opening idea, Mussorgsky gives us this. Again, not one of his finer inspirations, and he plays it twice. Exactly the same thing, basically. Well, a little bit differently, but he just does it twice for no apparent reason, with big pauses between them. So there's no continuity at this point, which is one of the things I'm sure that Mussorgsky's colleagues objected to when they first saw it. And then he starts to try and pull the threads together based on that same music. And it's extremely, extremely ineffective. Rimsky-Korsakov, as we know, returns to the Dorothy running away from the Wicked Witch music and grafts onto it an extremely effective climax. I mean, really, really good and well constructed, that brings the whole thing to its final collapse. And here is that wonderful episode. Mussorgsky, in the meantime, has brought about something of a recapitulation of that da 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 bum bum in its close to definitive form, the form that he first introduced it in its usual sound, and then tries to work up to a finale that is absolutely one of the trashiest things you've ever heard in your life. It's so obviously desperately trying to find the right ending, and here that is. Oh, it's just awful. I mean, it's just really, truly bad music. And I kind of enjoy bad music because it's an interesting aesthetic question. What is good music? What is bad music? This is bad music. Here you go. Why is it bad music? Well, cheesy harmony and the obvious efforts to try and make a climax. Efforts which, when they finally end, aren't going to work out terribly well. See, this piece actually, in the way that it's published, has a quiet ending. There's a quiet ending and there's a loud ending. And I'm not exactly sure how the loud ending got there, because I have the score of the original version and it ends quietly, which is even more ineffective than what we just heard. It's much better to just whip it up into a frenzy and then stop with a bump, which is what Kuchar does. And however, for whatever reason he does, and another big fan of this version was Claudio Abbado, and he did it twice, and I think one of them was loud and one of them was soft. I don't know. There are a couple ways to do it, and it may have something to do with the additions or what the original sources say. I haven't gone into it, and I'm not terribly concerned about it. But as you can hear, the Mussorgsky just comes to a rather abrupt and somewhat cheesy ending. And the Rimsky, of course, has that long drawn-out coda after the bell rings and the spirits disperse. And it's very sad and very beautiful, as you saw actually in Fantasia, because we're getting to that in another minute. The version that Stokowski used in Fantasia. So you have the bell and the dawn thing. That is all based on the Sorochinsky Fair version. That is original Mussorgsky material that Rimsky extends a little bit to create that beautiful poetic coda with the harp and the bell and the, dawn is what it's supposed to be. Now, that's the comparison, essentially, of the two different versions. But Leopold Stokowski got his talons on the piece when he did Fantasia, and he made his own arrangement, which is based quite obviously on Rimsky-Korsakov. It's just gussied up Rimsky-Korsakov. And it's absolutely, putting makeup on a prostitute, if you want to call it that. I mean, it is really, really in questionable taste, and I love every minute of it. And just to show you how much fun it is, I want to play you that final climax, the one, just before the bell rings and the spirits disperse and all that. This is how Stokowski does it. Oh, God, this is great. Note the xylophone and the percussion writing. Oh, pardon me. I just want to say, I used the same cover, but here's the one it was. This was Jose Cerebriere with the Bournemouth Symphony and his fabulous Naxos disc of Mussorgsky reworkings by Stokowski. So that's what that was. That's the Stokowski version, and it's just marvelous. And the Rimsky ends quietly and poetically. Stokowski, no, he wants the sun to come up, which it does, to a fabulous tam-tam crescendo with a brilliant loud chord at the very, very end. So you see, there is a Night on Bald Mountain for every taste. You can have the original version for those days when you're feeling down in the dumps and want to feel like even you could be a better composer than Mussorgsky. And then there's the Rimsky version for weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs, confirmations, and quinceaneros, and whatever you want it for. And then there is the Stokowski version for, let's say, Las Vegas celebrations, maybe the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, any place where xylophone riffs and tam-tam crescendos and string harmonics and other screechy sounds would be particularly appropriate. There is a Night on Bald Mountain for every taste. So I hope that you've enjoyed this comparison of these different versions. And what I really would like you to come away with, just this is a personal thing with me, but really what I want to stress is, the scholarship is not impartial. Scholarship is almost never impartial. It's usually terribly biased. And the Mussorgsky people hate the Rimsky people, and the Rimsky people hate the Mussorgsky people. I mean, there aren't that many Rimsky people. His reputation is waning. It waned after he died because he was such a dominant force in Russian music for such a long time. And the Mussorgskians kind of took over, especially in light of communism and socialist realism, because he was looked upon as a man of the people and a sort of disgusting, sweaty, alcoholic, anti-Semitic slob who somehow really represented the soul of Russia. And maybe he did. I don't know. But the point is that today, particularly with scholarship, with the texts and original versions and first thoughts and all of that shit that makes us crazy these days in music and has completely upset our very comfortable views of what a masterpiece is supposed to be. A little discomfort's a good thing. Some of it is just ridiculous. And what I really want to stress in the Rimsky version, even if you consider it to be more Rimsky than Mussorgsky, it doesn't matter, is its sheer craftsmanship, competence, intelligence, unerring feel for climax and proportion and form as a whole. Taken as a whole, Mussorgsky's original has wonderful ideas. Obviously, Rimsky used them all. None of it is original. And fantastic moments, but it's a mess. It's a big, rough, bleeding mess. And, you may enjoy that more. That's not the point. What you like is not the point. The point is recognizing quality work. H.L. Mencken, I think, was it? What was it? He said something about, the only thing I want is just competence in anything from adultery to zoology. I mean, that's the name of the game here. Because if you recognize the quality of work that Rimsky-Korsakov did, the mastery of orchestration, the beautiful, elegant shaping of the work, then we will understand those qualities wherever we hear them in our peregrinations through the classical music universe. And that's a good thing to cultivate, I think. I really do think it is. Because there's only good music and bad music. And which is always going to be subjective. But I happen to believe that in certain technical aspects, quality is a fact, not an opinion. and there is far more of that in Rimsky-Korsakov's arrangement than there is in the original. And it was a labor of love, and it deserves to be respected, and it deserves its popularity. Everybody adores it. And I sure as hell do. And I hope you do too. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Take care.